People forget it's a role and confuse it with you. A quote from Julie Andrews, who knows more than most what it is to have the public see no difference between you and the parts you've played. She started out on the stage, a child star in the West End, then went to America and caused a sensation on Broadway, starring as Eliza Doolittle in My Fair Lady. When that role was being cast in Hollywood, Julie missed out to Audrey Hepburn. But then came Mary Poppins and Maria von Trapp, two of the best-loved characters in movie history. They brought Julie awards and international superstardom, but also an image she would struggle to shake off. Are you really like that? Is a question she'd been asked throughout her career, as we see here in an interview with Michael Parkinson in 1974, which also featured her husband, the film director Blake Edwards.
In fact, or did you resent that? You must have come across this when you met people in that period, particularly when Mary Poppins was so popular, this thing that people expected to be something that one imagines you're not, really. Nobody's that good, are they?
Well, no. Obviously not. Really, it was a slow-growing thing. It didn't happen immediately. And, in fact, there were a couple of films. There was one film after Poppins that seemed to stop any kind of image, which was the Americanization of Emily. So it's really over the years, as time has gone by, that the image seems to have grown. And I guess that's because one's more and more exposed, the more films one does. And
yes.
Something obviously seems to come across.
Yes. How much is she like, though, this image, if we can stick with this Mary Poppins thing for just a moment longer?
Do you insist?
Well, it is interesting, actually. To me, it might be seem a feeble inquiry to you, but...
I think it's a fairly easy answer. Just get her to run through her four-letter word vocabulary, and you find out.
She doesn't swear.
Listen, when I met her, I didn't even think she went to the bathroom.
Blake, how do you see it? Because you're, in fact, as I said, a film producer and director and a writer. How do you see her as a film property? If you're going to take a detached view, I mean, if you were in charge of a career at this moment right
well, he
now.
gets to sleep with me, if that's what you mean.
You mean that's how you get the jobs?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, I see. But let's talk about a spectacular success that you had. I mean, the film, I think, has grossed more money, Sound of Music, than any other movie, hasn't it? I think it's
certainly than any other musical.
Than any other musical, yeah.
Maybe now that since it's re-released, I think it probably is number one in grossing.
Yes.
It is close to like Godfather, I think.
It was kind of the odd story about that, though, wasn't it? The studio really had no faith in it when it first came out.
I don't know about that. I know that we were all very aware that it could be over-saccharine and sweet, and we had to be very careful about it. That with religion and nuns and children and mountains and all that sweetness going on, it was too much. And so we all tried to play it down and make it very real and as much as we could.
Yes.
But I don't think... no, there was a considerable lot of money spent on the film and hours put into it. I don't think they thought it wasn't too important. I do know that I don't suppose anybody had any idea how successful it was going to be.
Yes. Well, let's have a look at the sequence from it that I suppose everybody remembers. We showed part of it before you came on, which is that magnificent opening sequence, that huge shot over the mountains there, and the camera comes onto you. Beautiful moment.
Have sung for 1,000 years. The hills fill my heart with the sound of music. My heart wants to sing every song it hears. My heart wants to beat like the wings of the birds that rise from the lake to the trees. My heart wants to sigh like a chime that flies from a church on a breeze. to laugh like a brook when it trips and falls over stones on its way, to sing through the night like a lark who is learning to pray. I go to the hills when my heart is lonely. I know I will hear what I've heard before. My heart will be blessed with the sound of music, and I'll sing once
It's a smashing shot, isn't it? That over the top of the hill, the helicopter shot
Yes,
there. Yeah.
it was an amazing shot to be in the middle of, because it was a helicopter that was coming at one sideways, of course, because the cameraman was hanging out at the side of the helicopter. And how they ever do that, I don't know, because there's no door or anything. It's just a camera down at you like this. But it was a jet helicopter, and every time we would do many, many takes before they were satisfied, and so the helicopter would come towards me and get closer and closer. This great sort of giant crab or grasshopper sort of looked like it was sidestepping towards me, and then it would make a circle and go back and come through the trees again, and I'd have to rush to the end of the field and start all over again. But every time it made the circle to go back, it would knock me flat from the downdraft of the jets. And so I would do my lovely bit, and then it would go bam, you know. And I'd pick myself up, and I got so angry because it just kept knocking me down.
Did you swear?
Yes.
You did? Do you ever get the urge to be, perhaps in those days, after the success of that film, to be outrageous in public? It's because people expected you to be too sweet and things,
Oh, yes.
etc.
And if you're in a long run and you've been saying the same lines over and over and over again, you think, God, what if I say something absolutely dreadful? And it just comes pouring out, and I have no control over myself, you know.
Yes.
And then the word gets bigger and bigger and bigger in your mind, and you think, I'm going to say it in a minute, you know.
Well, I see. You have a word you think that I might inject here
Yes.
instead. I see. Can you give me an example?
Well, no, I can't really.
Do you think she's fibbing? Go on, even think of one example, surely.
Oh, let's forget it.
Well, tell me then about the problem of working on stage for a long time, in a long run. It must be very, very tedious, mustn't it? I mean, you did what? You did Boyfriend, My Fair Lady, and Camelot.
Yes.
Each of them, all of them.
All long
Incredible
runs,
long
yes.
runs, weren't they?
Fair Lady was the longest. It was 2 years on Broadway and then 18 months in London. So 3.5 years is like a long tunnel that you think you'll never come out the other end, you know. I broke it down into sort of 3-month sections. The first 3 months, you're struggling to get it right and to sort of gain control of it. And the next 3 months are just lovely. You're having a marvelous time, getting everything nice and sort of rosy. And then the next 3 months, you look for things and you listen to the counter melodies in the orchestra, and you try and combat the fact that you've got a headache that night, or your leading man has a cold or whatever, and you find anything to give you motivation. And then the last 3 months are just slog, and from then on it's slog, and you just do anything you can to keep fresh.
Do you ever get the giggles on stage?
Well, yes, terribly. I mean, there were times that Rex was very naughty in My Fair Lady, and he would kind of tease me occasionally or do things deliberately sometimes, and I would know that he was kind of going to try and make me giggle, and boy, he sure did. And there were a few other things too, but...
Tell me.
Go ahead, darling.
Get out of this one. Come on. There was one classic evening in My Fair Lady when we were doing the famous scene at the end of the play where Eliza has run away from Professor Higgins' house, and she's gone to Mrs. Higgins' house. And Higgins comes storming in to talk to his mother, and there is Eliza. And Eliza gives forth with a long, long lecture about the difference between a gutter snipe and a lady. is on how she's treated and so on and so forth. And that evening, I don't know what happened to Rex. He must have eaten beans before dinner or whatever. But he was extremely windy, putting it mildly. And I was delivering my great speech, and suddenly across the orchestra pit there was this machine gun volley. And that's the only way it can be described. And there was utter silence. The orchestra was stunned. I didn't know what had happened. And at that precise moment, it was Mrs. Higgins' turn to say, "Henry, dear, please don't grind your teeth." Well, I swear it's true. And I was absolutely gone. I mean, first of all, I was so nervous that I was going to giggle that I was giggling anyway. And every other line that I had to say in the scene had a double meaning from then on, because I would say things like, "So you are a motor bus, all bounce and go, and no consideration for anyone," and this kind of thing. And finally, and I could see the line coming closer and closer towards me, and all Higgins has to do in this whole scene is turn his back to the audience and just listen to Eliza, singing and carrying on. And I finally went up to him and sang, "No, my reverberating friend, not the beginning and the end." And I was gone, and I think it took an extra 10 minutes to finish the scene that night.
Oh, poor Rex Harrison. Oh, dear.
Rex Harrison, what about me?
Tell me, you, as I say, you did these 3 great stage hits in America and here. And you never did the film version of any of them, did you? I mean, Twiggy
No.
did Boyfriend.
Yes.
Vanessa Redgrave did Camelot, and Audrey Hepburn did My Fair Lady. You must have been very resentful about that.
I wasn't really resentful because I did understand why. Obviously, the first one was Fair Lady that was done. I understood why Audrey was chosen, and I hadn't ever made a film before and was a complete unknown as far as films were concerned. I was disappointed. I mean, I would have loved to have done it, obviously, and was hoping that I might be asked. But it's hard to be resentful when right around the corner Walt Disney happened to be waiting and asked me to do Mary Poppins. And so, no, I couldn't be that disappointed after that. I mean, that resentful after that.
It's a very curious system, isn't it, though, where you have somebody who's been very successful on stage with a musical, and a smash hit musical, and then you pick somebody to play the part in the film who can't even sing. Because, I mean, perhaps you can enlighten me as to the sort of thinking behind that, because, you...
I think it's what Hollywood terms box office. And in those days...
Yes, it wouldn't happen quite so much today.
No, you wouldn't find it as much because you don't have quite the same thinking, and the star system is somewhat different, although it's getting back to that star system pretty much. It's amazing how the metamorphosis is taking place. A complete cycle is coming up.
Yes.
But I just don't think it would happen. They called it box office. J.L. Warner felt that she was not box office, that Audrey Hepburn was. He wanted Cary Grant to play Higgins.
Cary Grant.
Yes. Yeah.
That was an inspired piece of casting, wasn't it? Extraordinary. What would he have sounded like?
He would have said, "Liza, Liza, Liza." Something like that.
I read a story which said that, in fact, when you took My Fair Lady to Broadway, that, in fact, you had to refine the Cockney accent.
I was hopeless at it, and I never thought that my Cockney accent was any great shakes anyway. But I did. I was taught Cockney by an American professor of phonetics, complete reversal on what the play was all about.
Really?
Yes.
Extraordinary.
And that's just the way it was. I'm not very good at accents. I can learn, and I have a fairly quick ear, but I can't just do things naturally like that.
How much of a traumatic experience was that? Were you so bullied into it?
No, that part of it was fine. The whole role was the hard thing, the enormous transitions, and it was a very difficult role because at one minute you were screaming and yelling your guts out in Cockney, and the next minute dancing like crazy, and the next minute singing I Could Have Danced All Night in a pure soprano, and then doing all the very heavy dramatic scenes as well. Alan Lerner once said that it's probably better to have a long run and a really superb role than to do umpteen weeks in summer stock or something like that.
Yes. Going back to the Mary Poppins thing, you certainly got your revenge on the film industry, if one could put it that way. I mean, you turned around and cocked a snook at them, didn't you? Because you got an Oscar for it.
Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, first of all, why did that film work, do you think?
Poppins? Well, it was the first musical, I think. I may be wrong. It wasn't the first musical that Disney had done, but it was the first really big one in a long, long time. I mean, the first... Also, it combined that fabulous thing of animation and live action and all the things. There was incredible tricks and feats in it. And it had a joyousness, I suppose. I don't really know why it worked. A funny story like that, it's amazing.
Well, it's enough to say it was Disney, too, isn't it? Because the Disney name and
I think it was the way he
Disney
mounted it.
organization
And,
is magic. It always has been.
And he really did make magic. I mean, the things that they thought up for that film, it was amazing. And as a first film, it was a little staggering because I was asked to do things like when the penguins are dancing with Mary Poppins and things. Well, of course, there were no penguins. They were all drawn later and done as cartoon, but one had to play to them as if they were on that table. And you know, if you look at your hand, you look at the hand. If you take the hand away, you're looking really far beyond it.
Yes.
So it was very difficult to pretend one was looking at it.
Yes.
When Mary owns your hand, you feel so grand. Your heart starts beating like a big brass band. It's a jolly old day with Mary. No wonder that it's Mary that we love. No wonder that it's Mary that we love. No wonder that it's Mary that we love.
You've got a reputation also of being a practical joker.
I have.
Yes. Again, from what one reads about you, is this true?
Actually, I guess of the two of us, Blake's more of a practical joker. I occasionally will do silly things, but it usually takes somebody like Blake or a very good friend or a close friend like Carol Burnett or somebody like that to spark me off, and then I'll really get absolutely idiotic.
Like what sort of things? I mean, how elaborate are you a practical joker?
Well, not so much a practical joke, just doing silly things. There was a night when Carol Burnett and I, who are very close friends, she's godmother to my daughter and just an awfully good chum, and we had been asked to sing at President Johnson's inaugural gala in Washington. And so we had been asked to do a medley that we'd done on a television show. So I came from California and she came from New York, and we were very pleased to see each other. And Mike Nichols, who is a good friend of ours, was coming into the hotel also that evening, and we left word for him to call us as soon as he arrived. And at about 10 o'clock at night, he called, and we said, well, why don't you come down and join us in this suite? We were having some coffee and hot chocolate and things like that. And he said, I'll be right down. Now, Carol and I happened to be in our robes. We were sort of dressed casually. And we both said, let's run down the corridor and meet him at the elevator and surprise him. There can't be many people about in the hotel this hour. So we did. Now we sat in front of the elevator, and once you're there, what do you do? So we sort of said, well, let's turn our toes in. No, let's turn them out. And then I suddenly said, well, why don't we be in a passionate embrace when the elevator doors open, and he'll be surprised and think it funny. So she said, well, who's going to be the man? And so on and so forth. And I said, well, never mind. And the elevator went ding, and I said, quickly, let's do it. So Carol swept me down in a deep embrace, and a total stranger walked out of the elevator. And Carol sank to her knees and went round behind the couch and wanted to hide. It was a lady that came out of the elevator, and she just gave us a very peculiar look and went on down the corridor. Well, I was laughing so hard I was crying. The elevator went ting, and we said, well, it must be Mike this time. So back we went into our embrace, and the doors opened, and it was packed with Secret Service men who were in the hotel, and nobody stepped out, but as the doors closed, they all sort of went like that. And then this lady who had come out of the elevator came all the way back down the corridor and said to Carol, aren't you Carol Burnett? And Carol said, yes, but that's Mary Poppins. And finally, Mike, the elevator went ting again, and Mike did step out of the elevator, and of course by this time we were giggling all over the place, but we flung ourselves into our embrace, and he just walked past us and said, "Oh, hi, girls." And didn't even notice.
Marvelous,
Yeah.
marvelous. What's the problem involved, Blake, of being married to somebody as famous as Julie? Because I mean, to the public, I mean, you are in fact little known until you spell out what you've done. Then people have said, "Well, I've seen these films," this sort of thing. But you're not a public figure in the sense that she is. Do you ever get resentful of that? That people must meet you and say, "Ah, that's Mr. Julie Andrews."
No, that doesn't bother me. I don't think it ever has. As a matter of fact, it kind of amuses me. The only thing I think upsets me at all is, and not so much now because our whole lifestyle has changed, but in the beginning I was required to go to various functions with her, and I hate that. I mean, I hate the fact that you've got a suit on, because I never wear one. It's a nice suit.
Just feeling inadequate. That's all right.
But I really despise going to dinner parties and things like that.
We both do, actually, so it's not
It's
so
not
bad.
the way I like to live, and fortunately, it's not the way she does either. In the
Mm.
beginning, I kind of had to tag along and put up with all of those lights, and there was a lot of criticism about the relationship and the marriage and things like that, which, in the press, and that got me up a little tight. But in terms of being Mr. Andrews or the husband who was little known, married to a big star, listen, as long as she's making the money, it's great.
You mentioned there's something that must again affect you as well, which is press criticism. You said about the time of your marriage and this sort of thing. How do both of you react to press criticism? What about you, Julia? Does it bring the worst out in you when people say things about you that you know are not true?
Criticism in the form of a review for a film doesn't really bother me too. I mean, obviously one hopes that people will like it or that the press will like it, but the kind of things that make me very angry are what I call the gutter press, the columnists, people who just write anything for the sake of gossip, and it can be tremendously hurtful. I know there was a time in Hollywood when it seemed that I was the target for everyone, and it was very hard on my children in school and things like that. They had to contend with it too. It wasn't just me, and I got mad about that.
Why were you the target? Why were the particular
I think
target?
possibly because I was, Miss Pollyanna and Mary Poppins and everything else. The image was that, and it
Also,
was
they
about
run
time
out
to
of
tilt.
good things to write. It doesn't become news anymore. They've
Yes.
said all the good things. Now, what do we do?
I think
Well,
after a
obviously, we
measure of
attack.
success,
Yes.
people feel that it's about time you had your douse of
She's one of the few people that took some of those atrocious magazines to task legally against advice from agents, attorneys, everybody saying, don't do it, you can't win. Friends said, don't get involved in that, it'll be dirty. And because these two particular magazines chose to attack her on a level that was really irreprehensible. It was a terrible thing that they were really doing, because one implied that she was not a good mother, that she did certain things with her child that really horrendous. The other, interestingly enough, at first we both just laughed about, accused her of having an illicit affair or an open affair with Sidney Poitier, like this was going to be something terrible. And my response to that was, Jesus, baby, if you're finding time based on our relationship, you're quite a lady. And Sidney is an old friend. Julie doesn't even know him. She met him once. And it kept
No, but
going.
what made me angry was that they implied that I could
Well-
be persuaded to terminate the affair.
Well, that's what I was getting to. That what really happened, what really then turned the table was that they implied that she was forced to terminate the affair because the studio, the big bosses, said that the image of she and Sidney would be bad for her box office-wise, and that therefore she terminated it. And she got so angry for Sidney's sake and for the whole idea that something like that
Could be written. I mean,
could
that's
be
an appalling
written,
thing to do.
that she sued him, and by God, she won.
It's extraordinary, that.
Oh,
I mean,
it's
it's almost unbelievable, isn't it?
She's a lady who seldom verbalizes her displeasure with these people, but once, a particular lady in Hollywood, who for some reason, we don't know because we don't know the lady, has viciously attacked both of us, and constantly, in the worst possible way. And And I feel sorry for the lady because obviously she's got a great problem. And I've seen her, and she does have a great problem. but one time she wrote something, and it got to us vis-a-vis the usual route of friends and everything. Julie was in the bathroom, and I was sitting on the bed.
See, I do go to the bathroom.
I said you were in the bathroom, darling. I didn't say you were going. And I said, what do you think about that? And for the first time, she really came out with something. She said very properly, you know what that lady needs? She needs open heart surgery, and they should go in through her feet.
It was at this time that I appeared with Julie in the 1974 film The Tamarind Seed. It was an amazing experience. Julie was terrific to work with, and above all, great fun. Afterwards, she took a 5-year break from filmmaking, and she added to her family by adopting 2 girls from Vietnam. But she did manage a return to the London stage, which she discussed with Sue Lawley on The Tonight programme in 1976.
And how do you face the prospect of facing a real live audience for the first time for so long?
I am very scared.
Are you?
Yes, I am. There are days when I get very excited and very thrilled, and the greater part of me is looking forward to it a lot. But I must say, I think I'm going to be awfully nervous for a couple of nights.
Yes, but you know you'll go out there in the end and it'll come.
I'll go out. I don't know if my legs will buckle or not.
You first appeared, of course, at the Palladium in a Royal Variety performance when you were 12. How did you come to be there? How did you earn your place there?
The very first show I ever appeared in was at the London Hippodrome, and I was a sort of overnight success. I sang one song for 2 performances each night, and I guess it came to the attention of the committee that gets people to do the Royal Command performances, and so I was asked to do it.
What was that song?
It was a song called the Polonaise from Mignon, which was lots of coloratura and a sort of very cut version of the coloratura.
And could you sing it now?
No, good heavens, no.
Why? It's beyond you now?
Yes, it would be, it had lots of vocal gymnastics, and I had a sort of voice with an enormous range when I was much younger, when I was a child.
Yes, the word freak has been used about your voice then for some reason. Why was it freaky?
Because it was rather freaky. I mean, I had about a 5-octave range, and I could do all sorts of things with it, as I say. And then as I matured, my voice kind of got warmer and more normal, and all those high notes disappeared, and thank God.
Your mother has said of you that as a child you were, and I quote, boss-eyed, bow-legged and buck-toothed. Now, is that right?
Absolutely,
I
yes.
can't believe it.
Yes.
What happened to all those deformities?
Boss-eyed, buck-toothed and bandy-legged. Yes, I could add a few more to that.
What happened?
Well, I guess as a career blossomed, I guess I wore braces on my teeth like a lot of other teenagers, and ballet seemed to help the legs a little bit. And I don't know about the eye. It does wander from time to time.
Can we talk for a moment about your image? I mean, the one thing that everyone thinks of Julie Andrews, well, they think of Julie Andrews is Mary Poppins. She is prim, she is nice, she's very proper. Are you all those things?
Oh, gosh. You'd have to ask my husband about that, I think. I hope I'm not quite as prim and proper as a lot of people make me out to be. I think that when you're exposed a lot in an industry, when you make a certain number of films and certain things become obvious and one is slightly bracketed, but...
Does that annoy you, that sort of bracketing? I mean, people won't let you get away from that image. I mean,
we'll
they
see
you...
when I get to the Palladium, maybe they will. No, I can't knock the image because things like The Sound of Music were wonderful films and gave a lot of people a lot of pleasure and things like that. I'd like to be allowed to extend myself and do other things, yes.
I mean, you have tried, haven't you, in that you made the Hitchcock film with Paul Newman, Torn Curtain.
Yes.
You made The Tamarind Seed with your husband directing.
Yes.
Those were very straight roles.
And I enjoyed doing them very much indeed, yes.
But you weren't as successful in them as you are in your Mary Poppins Thoroughly Modern Millie roles.
Yes, or maybe it's that musicals are very enjoyable and naturally much bigger successes too, though I understand what you're saying.
But does that upset you at all? Would you like, what I'm saying is, would you like to feel free or be allowed to be free by your public, to be accepted as a straight actress Or do you think that is not where your talent lies?
I think, oh, that's an awfully hard question to answer, in that I suppose choice of material dictates a lot. And I think hopefully if I do a job well, the public will enjoy it. And I just, I suppose in my early career, happened to do an awful lot of lovely, romantic, or, governess-like roles and so on.
Do you ever wish you hadn't done it? I mean, money apart.
No,
success
never.
apart.
I must be truthful. Although I do giggle, and there's an awful lot of teasing in the family about my image and things like that, I don't regret it at all.